She sat on the splintered bench beneath the overhang of the depot roof, bonnet brim sagging with dust, skirts heavy with the grime of waiting. Trains came and trains went. Conductors shouted. Wagons rolled past. And still, no man stepped forward to claim her. Her belly was a visible truth beneath the folds of her faded calico, a truth that silenced questions and sharpened stares. Each hour made her smaller in the eyes of the world, until she felt herself becoming as thin as the shadows cast by the hitching posts at sundown. On the fourth evening, she nearly fell. Hunger had hollowed her legs, and the sound of an oncoming freight blurred her mind. She rose to stretch, dizziness sweeping through, and her body leaned forward toward the flashing steel. Then a hand gripped her arm, calloused, steady, a hand that did not tremble at the weight of her. She was pulled back with one motion, as simple as pulling a branch from the fire before it blackened. The man who caught her was tall, broad across the shoulders, his hat brim shadowing a face weathered but still young, no more than 32. His shirt was dusted with trail grit, vest dark with age, boots caked in mud from 100 miles of silence. He said nothing. His silence was not cruel. It was the silence of someone who weighed every word before setting it loose. Beside him stood a little girl, 7 years old, hair braided and tied with a scrap of ribbon. Her eyes, wide and solemn, darted from her father's face to the stranger's. "Papa," she whispered, tugging at his sleeve, "she's gonna die if we leave her here." The man's eyes flicked once to his daughter, then back to the woman slumped on the bench. He lifted her without asking, one arm beneath her knees, the other braced around her back, careful not to press her belly. She did not resist. She was too tired for pride. The warmth of his chest was startling after days of cold boards and colder air. The murmurs of the station master trailed them, muttering about foolish burdens, but the man did not break stride. Outside, his wagon waited, its bed carrying a small basket covered by cloth. The child uncovered it, revealing biscuits wrapped in paper, and held one out to the woman. Her hand trembled as she took it. The first bite split her lips with salt from her own tears, but she kept eating until her breath evened again. The little girl watched her with quiet triumph, as if she had saved something rare. They rode in silence through the fading light. The road bent between bare cottonwoods, their branches like bones scratching at the sky. The woman rested her head against the sideboard, lulled by the rocking wheels and the low creak of leather harness. Night settled around them with the scent of frost and smoke. The ranch appeared not as a proud spread but a survivor's refuge, fence lines bowed, barn leaning, cabins small against the emptiness. Yet there was firelight inside, glowing steady. He carried her across the threshold, setting her down beside the hearth. The child covered her with a quilt stitched from scraps of flannel and faded gingham. He poured hot water into a tin cup, handed it over without comment. She drank, warmth traveling through her hollow frame. The smell of beans simmering on the stove pressed close, almost unbearable after days of emptiness. At supper she ate slowly, ashamed of the hunger that drove her. They said little. The cowboy kept his eyes on his plate, shoulders angled as though to grant her privacy. The girl filled the silence with talk of chickens and the calf born last spring. Each word was a lifeline flung across the table. The woman listened, clutching the quilt, the sound of innocence startling her into tears she hid with lowered lashes. Later, when the cabin slept, she stirred from a nightmare. In the dark, she felt a small hand slip into hers, the girl's hand, warm and trusting. "You're safe here," the child whispered. No sermon could have softened her so. She lay awake after that, staring at the rafters, hearing the steady breathing of both father and daughter, realizing she was no longer alone in the vast ache of the West. Morning brought frost sharp enough to etch patterns on the window. She tried to rise, but her legs betrayed her. The man was already outside, chopping wood. Each swing of the axe was measured, deliberate, the kind of motion that came from a man who wasted nothing. She watched him unseen, studying the steadiness of his back, the patience of his stance. He was not the kind of man who filled the air with words. He filled it with work, and it was louder than speech. When she spoke of her past, it came in fragments. A man's advertisement in the paper, a promise of shelter, letters folded and cherished. 4 days at the station, waiting until whispers said he had been killed in a drunken fight, or perhaps had lied from the start. Before him, there had been another man, one who left bruises and this child within her. She confessed none of this directly, only hinted when the wind rattled the cabin door or when a shadow passed too close. He never pressed her, but his silence was not indifference. It was space and it was respect. Trouble found them all the same. A neighbor rode up one noon, his voice low, warning. Men in town had been speaking of her, men who claimed she had been promised as payment, that she was theirs to collect. They had guns, he said, and little fear of law this far out. She froze when she heard it, shame flooding her again like old poison. She tried to rise, to say she would leave at once, but the cowboy only checked the latch on his rifle. He moved her and his daughter deeper inside, his face unreadable. That night, the three of them huddled by the fire. Wolves howled across the hills. She told him her name at last, almost in a whisper. He repeated it once, low, as if returning it to her. For the first time in years, she felt less like a shadow and more like someone who might endure. Just before dawn, riders came. 3 men, silhouettes against the gray horizon, rifles slung careless. They dismounted with jeers, calling her spoiled goods, their laughter thick with cruelty. They demanded she be handed over. The cowboy stepped onto the porch, rifle resting easy in his arm. His words were few. "Not while I'm breathing." The little girl pressed her face to the window, small hand gripping the woman's. The woman's body shook. "I'm not worth dying for," she whispered. He did not turn, only said, voice low and iron, "My girl asked me to help. That's reason enough." The first shot cracked the silence. One outlaw spurred his horse forward, but the cowboy's bullet found him clean. Another circled toward the barn, striking a match. The pregnant woman, breath ragged, seized a bucket and hurled water, dousing the flame before it caught. She stumbled, belly heavy, but stood her ground as the cowboy finished the fight. Smoke and dust swirled, horses reared, the world thundered with chaos. Then the last outlaw seized the little girl, dragging her onto the porch with a pistol pressed to her temple. The woman's cry split the air. She stepped forward, voice breaking, offering herself in exchange. The outlaw's eyes lit with triumph. In that instant, the cowboy drew faster than thought, one clean shot dropping the man. The girl fell free, scrambling into her father's arms. The woman sagged, clutching her belly, sobs racking her, but she was alive. They all were. Silence returned, broken only by the wind. The storm broke, sunlight spilling pale gold across the cabin. The cowboy knelt by her, his hands steady on her shoulder. His daughter clung to both of them, face pressed against the woman's side. For the first time since she had arrived, the woman allowed herself to believe in safety. Night fell again. Inside, she lay near the fire, the girl curled against her, small breath warm on her arm. The cowboy stood in the doorway, hat in hand, gaze resting on them as though committing the sight to memory. She whispered, eyes half closed, "I thought no one would ever come." His answer was quiet steel. "We're here now." Outside, the west stretched vast and merciless, but within that small cabin, something fragile had taken root. The wind pressed against the walls, promising more trials ahead. Yet for this night, they were bound by a choice, by blood not of kin but of mercy. And in the hush between fire crackles and breath, the question lingered, whether this was only survival, or the beginning of a life neither had dared imagine. Would he keep her when morning came, or would the world find a way to take her once more? The answer hovered like a storm on the horizon, waiting to break.